Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of Gear Talk, and this time I'm going to talk to you about exposure meters, reflective versus incident light. As usual, before we begin, if you enjoy these videos, please put a like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and if you want to go a step further to support the channel, check out my webpage where there's a page dedicated to the book that I wrote, and if you see some books that can look interesting for you, get it, and that will be a great way to support the channel. This said, let's talk about the exposure meters, and the difference are between incident meters and reflective meters. Incident light meters, they measure, as the name say, the light that comes toward the subject, and you put the meter, for example, I use this to create this video, you put the meter in front of the subject, click, and the meter will tell you if you turn it on before, and you just click and the meter will tell you how much light you have, and so what are the values that you have to put in your camera in terms of shutter speed and aperture, for example. And in this case, with 400 ISO set it, I have 1/30th of a second, 4.05 is the aperture that I have to put, and all is done. Once you did that, there are no problems. You can have a gray piece of paper and will be gray in the image. You can have a white piece of paper, will be white in the image. You can have a black one and will be black in the image. And why I show you this? Because contrary to the incident light, the reflective meter, they don't measure the light that is coming from onto the subject, but they measure the light that is reflected by the subject. So a meter like this, by the way, this is a spot meter, so it's very precise and reads a 1 degree spot on the subject, but is the same as the meter that you have in your camera usually. That is less precise in the reading because it reads more a value that is usually in kind of an average of the sheen, but the principle is the same. So if I get this meter and I point the meter to me and I click, I think, why 1/30th of a second and 11.2 instead of 4 or 5? And okay, I did the reading, I go to my camera and decide that I put the values in it, and I put 11, I put 30th of a second, and all this is totally underexposed. Why this happened? It's very simple. Let me get back the values on the camera and I will explain. When I pointed the exposure meter to myself, toward myself, I pointed in this area, and this area is white because I have a white t-shirt. And this meter is, as all the meters, is kind of stupid because he doesn't know at all what he is reading. He knows that there's that light reflected by something, but he has no idea if he's reading something white, black, very reflective, not very reflective, and so on. What the meter assumes is that this subject is this, and this is a medium gray card, 18% of reflectance, and is exactly this. I think you can still find them to buy. I bought these years ago when it was film time and was no other options. So this is the tonality that this meter assumes your subject has. So if you read on this tonality and you have exactly the 2.829, so you have exactly the reading that you have with this meter, you have with this. So 30th of a second f4 can be a couple of tenths of a stop of difference, depends if this is very aligned or not, but it gives you the same value. So I go to the camera, I put the values are the same that you see here. And when I have those values, I can put up the black and it's black. I can put up the white and it stays white. But the problem is that I have to read a value that is a gray value. If I read something that is white or black, it gives a difference. If I read on a black card, it will say 204, so it gives me two stops less, almost 2 stops less. And this is not very black, very dark, it's kind of reflective. If I read on the white, as we have seen before, it will give me F11, so 2 spots over. So, how to use these meters? When you have an incident light meter, as I said, you put there and you don't worry about anything else. When you have a reflective meter, you have to think, is what I'm reading a medium gray or not? If I know that what I'm reading, the value I'm reading, is coming, for example, from a white sheet of paper, in this case, I get exactly 2 stops more. And it changed the light in the last 3 minutes. But I have here 30-second 8.05. So I read this and I think I wanted white on my picture. So I simply overexpose. Based on this reading, I overexpose a couple of stops and I will have the white in the camera. So exactly, my camera right now is overexposed 2 stops in respect of this reading. So it will come out white. If I have something that is black and I read it, I will have to underexpose a couple of stops to keep it black, or the exposure meter will want this to come out as a medium gray. So that's the huge difference. And if you think reading of this piece of paper, you think, why do you read on that and you don't read on something similar? But let's say you are outside taking a picture of a model in white dress over a white wall. That can happen. And so you measure the light, and if you have the spot meter, you can just select a point on your face that you think must be a medium gray. But usually if you have an exposure meter that is not that precise as the one with your camera, you read, and all this white sheen will come out a medium gray, because the exposure meter in your camera assumes that the average of the sheen is a medium gray. If you have a black model with a black dress on a black wall, that's exactly the opposite. If you take the picture, it will come out very light. If you want to keep the tonality in the right way, you measure the black wall and you decide, okay, and I get this reading, underexpose the readings, I select values that are supposedly underexposed by this reading, and so I will have the correct values and the correct tonalities in the film, on the film or on the sensor. That's the thing. It's the most important thing to understand is that reflective meters assumes that this is your subject, while incident meters, they don't care at all about your subject. So you get the readings from this and you don't worry about the subject tonalities, the subject color, the subject reflection. You get the reading from this and you must be very careful what are the things that you are reading with your meter. And you have to correct underexpose if it's black, overexpose if it's a white tonality, and that's to keep the things correct. Once you got the fact that the exposure meter is an instrument that is stupid, you cannot know what he is looking at, you will understand this is a pretty easy way to expose. So why we use reflective instead of always using incident? Because this can be easier. There are a couple of things. First of all, it's you don't always have the access to your subject. I mean, if I'm photographing myself like this, it's very easy, I do this. But, and I turn on it before I do it. But if I'm photographing, for example, the mountain out of the window, I'm kind of a lazy man, so I will not climb all up the mountain, take the measurement, come down, and probably the light changes because it passed 24 hours from my going up and coming down. So we don't always have the access to the subject. So with this meter, you have to put it close to the subject and in the direction of the camera. This is not easy to do. A second thing is that this doesn't count exactly, it's not so precise to understand how the subject can interact with light. You take the measure here, and here is exactly the value that I put, and it's supposed to be the gray like this, put in this direction. But as you can see, if I do a little bit like this, or a little bit like this, in this direction, is much brighter, in this direction is much darker. So if I want to keep a perfect medium gray, for example, with this situation, I have to keep in mind that he's getting more light and so on. So in theory, I have to point this more toward the light and so on. It's much easier to go with a spot meter. So I read this and I think, okay, this is 30 of a second, 8.02, so it's basically a stop difference from this position to this, and I can still have that value exactly where I want. So it's much easier. We are interested to know how the light is interacting and reflected by the subject. So this is one of the reasons. And the other reason, obviously, to prefer this is you can measure the mountain in front of you without climbing it. And it gives you, if you go with a spot meter like this, gives you the option to measure the light perfectly in every area of the image and decide, especially if you have a dynamic range of the sheen that is superior to what your camera, your film or your sensor can take, you can choose the compromise you want in many terms. So, for example, if for me it's very important to keep all the details in the shadow, I can measure the shadow, and in film it's very important to keep the details in the shadow. The highlights are less sensitive, in digital is the opposite, but I measure the darkest area I want with still some details, and I usually put it couple of stops less of the medium gray. So that's all. Similar with highlights, I know with film that I can go up as even 3-4 stops without problems, but I measure and I decide exactly if I have to sacrifice an area of the image in favor of another area of the image. It's much easier than with this. With this you can do it, but it's kind of guessing. So the superiority of this for a lot of subjects is important. There are many uses where this is much better. For example, in studio, multiple flashes. Best way to do is to measure the main light. You set the flash that corresponds to the setting you want in your camera of the main light, and then you can go around and pointing this flash toward the light using possibly the other accessory here that is a flat head. You point toward the light and you know that for example the light from back is a stop over the average light, the main light, or the shadow light is a couple of stops lower, and so on. So it's very easy to go around and regulate all the flashes with an instrument like this. And usually what I did in studio was to check all the flash, put all together with this, and then at the last moment with the subject there, just check with the spot meter that everything was falling in the correct areas of the image that I wanted, the zones of the image that I wanted. So this is another important thing to use the flashes. But no matter what you choose to use, if one, the other, or both systems together, you must know the difference. And the difference is that with this, you do not correct unless you are in very extreme situation, but you put on your camera the values that the exposure meter gives you. On these, you put the value that the exposure meter is giving you only if you are reading a medium gray or a tonality that is very similar to medium gray. If you are reading tonalities that are different, something darker, you need to underexpose, respect of the reading, and whiter tonalities you have to overexpose. I hope this was clear enough as an explanation of the difference between these two tools that we use and we must use when we take photographs. And if you have any comment, any request or something like that, let me know in the comment. Also, let me know if you want me to do a specific video for these two instruments, telling you exactly how they work and all the options that they have. If you're interested, let me know in the comments. This said, as usual, thank you for watching, and if you want to support the channel, put a like if you enjoyed the video, subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends. And if you want to go a step further, check out my books. Inkjet Fine Art Printing is a manual about inkjet printing, and Lasting Photographs, novel, very good reviews and is a photographic story. And Photography, the F manual. This has all the basics about photography, included a lot of things about metering, measure the light, and this is another point that is sometimes is easier to express in writing than on a video, at least for me. So check it out if you're curious, and that is a great way to support the channel. This said, thank you very much for watching, and see you next time with another video.